Bank robbery is, in fact, a dumb crime.
Unless, of course, your getaway plan includes a time machine, a fake mustache, and zero desire to buy anything conspicuous.
According to FBI statistics, the average bank heist is just over $4,000, with an average sentence of 159 months or 13 years, 3 months, with 75% of bank robbers being caught, with many of those caught within 24 hours. Hollywood would have us believe in years past the daring thieves were able, with guts and moxie, to escape, riding off in the sunset. But what about the first bank robbery in the United States? Were they highly skilled gentlemen bandits or complete morons in tri-cornered hats? Welcome to History is Criminal. I'm your host, Mick Biddick, and with me is my unqualified but unapologetic host, Kimberly.
Oh, stop. You're going to make me blush and then ignore everything you say for the rest of the episode. As always, I don't like history. I married into this. I'm just here to bring the sass, ask stupid questions, and point out that everyone in the past made terrible choices. Let's dig into the past again.
In today's episode, we jump into the Wayback Machine and travel to Philadelphia in 1798 in America's first bank robbery. August 1798 was a typical nasty, humid Philly summer. In addition to the sticky, thick air, a yellow fever epidemic gripped the city. The disease swept through the city, killing over 5,000 people, about 10% of the population. Some stayed in the city, including Dr. Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, advocate for public education, and women's rights activist. He set up a fever hospital for the victims of the outbreak. Many fled, including Alexander Hamilton and his wife. Apparently, they were off to listen to the hip hop musical about him. Those leaving headed to the countryside and cities across the young nation. All levels of society were equally impacted by the disease: the wealthy, the poor, and the working class. One of the working class who fled the city was a blacksmith, Patrick Lyon, and his 19-year-old apprentice. Patrick Lyon was born in England and at age 11 began his study of blacksmithing and locksmithing.
11. When I was 11, I was studying which flavor of Lick Smacker went best with my glitter nail polish.
Ooh, glittery nail polish. I doubt he had any of that,
Probably
but
not.
by the age of 25, he migrated to the United States, believing this is where he could make his fortune. In his memoir, he claimed that his first employer cheated him, but soon his skill as both a locksmith and a blacksmith earned him a solid reputation and a good living. An excellent fire engine was said to be among his most impressive creations. But that would have to be placed on hold as yellow fever ripped through the city. Lyon and the boy caught a small sailing ship headed towards Delaware. When they stepped off the ship in Lewiston, now Lewes, the boy had started to show signs of infection. The disease worked quickly, and within 2 days, the young apprentice was dead. How much Lyon mourned the boy's passing is unknown.
Sad. But also, welcome to the 1700s, where healthcare was mostly just hope and prayer.
And for many in the U.S., it still is. He was making the rounds of the city, and that meant hearing news and gossip. And the hottest news was actually coming from Lyon's hometown of Philadelphia. And Lyon was very interested in this news. Sometime on the night of August 31st or September 1st, someone robbed the Bank of Philadelphia at Carpenter's Hall. The take was impressive: $162,821, or just over $4 million in today's market.
That's not a heist, that's a generational wealth builder with a side of regret and prison time.
Lyon's interest was piqued because of his connection to the bank. His last job before leaving Philly was a rush to switch the lock on the safe before the Bank of Philadelphia moved into Carpenter's Hall. Carpenter's Hall had been at least the temporary home of two other banks, including the Bank of the United States, talking about Alexander Hamilton, America's first federal depository. The bank in Pennsylvania had chosen to move to Carpenter's Hall, which they viewed as a more secure location. There had been a failed attempt to break into their vault at the previous location at Philadelphia's Masonic Lodge. This would require the door and the lock to be refitted. Lyon's reputation made him the perfect person to refit the doors and the locks for the new bank's home. Whether out of idle curiosity or professional concerns that his door locks might have failed, he took a keen interest in the story. He read every news article he could find about the robbery. The evidence all pointed to an inside job. There was no sign of forced entry to either the carpenter's hall or the bank vault. It seemed that whoever pulled the job must have had a key.
Or maybe they were ghosts. I mean, it is Philly. Everything's haunted there.
Ooh, scary ghost. Lyon started to play the amateur detective and quickly suspected Samuel Robinson. Robinson had been hired by the bank to oversee their move to Carpenter's Hall. Robinson himself had actually selected Lyon to do the work on the door. Because it was a rush job, he had told Robinson that he didn't believe the doors were proper for the bank and the locks were not secure.
Translation: these doors are garbage, but sure, let me slap on a fancy lock and pray that it holds.
Mm. But the job needed to be done fast, and so he did what he could do. Lyon remembered a stranger that had accompanied Robinson to his blacksmith shop while he worked on the doors. The stranger had shown special interest in the doors and locks, more than just a passing curiosity. So much so that Lyon actually took note. Later, he passed the two on the street, and they seemed shocked to see his sudden appearance and stopped talking as he came near. Lyon told his apprentice that they seemed to be up to no good.
Spoiler alert, they were.
Those two, he reasoned, had to be tied to the crime. Only days later, Lyon's former landlord arrived in Lewiston, like himself, fleeing the yellow fever epidemic. By chance, the two ran into each other, and their conversation quickly turned to the robbery. It was only then that Lyon learned that he was the prime suspect in the robbery. Police in Philadelphia had the same thought he had. It must be an inside job. And who would have a better chance to make a copy of the keys to the vault than the man who had refitted the lock? Authorities also found it convenient that Lyon seemed to have left the city right around the time of the robbery. In fact, Lyon had left the city on the 26th of August, 5 days before the robbery. But it was 1798, so there wasn't much of a paper trail to prove when he had left. Even if he could prove he left the city 5 days earlier, that didn't rule out the possibility that he had passed a key to an accomplice. At that very moment, constables were combing the woods of New Jersey looking for the runaway blacksmith. It might take some time, but surely they would discover he was in Delaware. And I can't imagine it'd be too hard to disappear in 1798.
Right? Just grow a beard, start calling yourself Ezekiel. Boom, new life.
Yeah, I'm sure there were Ezekiels everywhere in 1798. Photographs were a long way off. News moved at the pace it could be carried by a person. The best anyone looking for him could go on would have been a written description and a poster made from an engraving. If Lyon had committed the crime, he had enough of a head start to easily flee to England, France, really anywhere in Europe, or even South America, and likely never be found. If he had even a fraction of the money with him, he could live like a king wherever he fled. But he headed back to Philly. Determined to clear his name, Lyon decided to return to Philadelphia. It was also his conviction that he could point the police in the correct direction. So it was that he arrived in the city of brotherly love and told the authorities about his suspicions, pointing the finger at Robinson and the unknown stranger who had visited his blacksmith shop.
Because nothing says smart decision like walking into the arms of the people who think you robbed the bank.
He believed all he had to do was tell the authorities to bring in Robinson and force him to give up the name of the stranger. That, Lyons was sure, would break the case wide open. And I'm sure the police politely listened just before throwing him in a cell on suspicion of bank robbery. He was questioned by the constable, the bank president, the chief cashier, which seems a little odd to have the victims questioning the suspect, but they were rich, and it was 1798, so rules maybe were a little different. Constable John Haynes was also happy to collect the $2,000 reward, around 52,000 today, for his capture. And capture might be an overstatement, as Lyons basically walked up to him and said, "Hey, I think you're looking for me."
Yeah, super menacing. Excuse me, officer. Hi. I'd like to ruin my entire life by voluntarily turning myself in.
Yep. And Lyon said the trio who questioned him were, quote, "I found I was in the hands of those who were not the most intelligent of mankind."
Which in the 1798 is a version of bless their heart. But wow, they're dumb.
The magistrate found he was a flight risk and set his bail at $150,000. Basically, the total of the take in the heist just rounded down. Lyon would sit in the Walnut Street jail for 3 months, contracting yellow fever while the real thieves walked free. Police were sure they had the right man. Now they just had to find the missing money, which, of course, Lyon had no clue as to its whereabouts. Robinson, it turned out, had nothing to do with the crime. The mysterious stranger, however, a man named Isaac Davis, the mysterious stranger was a member of the Carpenters Company, the business in charge of Carpenters Hall. He and Thomas Cunningham, a bank employee who rented a room in Carpenters Hall the night of the robbery, were the culprits. It would seem that Davis and Cunningham have pulled off the perfect crime. With Lyon in jail and the police not looking for any other suspects, the two thieves must have felt that they were in the clear. But, like they say, mo money, mo problems. And like I said in the intro, bank robbery is a dumb crime. Today, rob a bank and you have the FBI, state police, local police, video, die packs, IRS, and God knows who else looking for you. So you'd either have to be really intelligent and lucky to get away with it, or really dumb to try. And it turns out that Isaac Davis was the latter. Now, Kim, for the sake of argument, let's say you walked out of a bank with $4 million of the bank's money, and by the grace of the Almighty, it looked like you got away scot free. Police aren't even looking for you. What would be your next move? Now, I'm not talking years down the line, but in the first days and weeks following your successful robbery.
Well, since I'm like logically minded, I would still hold on to it and probably not buy anything that would draw attention to myself.
Well, Isaac, his first move was to start putting that same stolen money back into the bank. Now, he wasn't so stupid as to just show up at one bank with, $162,821 and just say, "I'm here to make a deposit." No, he was putting the money into every bank in town, including the Bank of Pennsylvania.
Okay, but like, why would you even think that was a good idea? You're if you're gonna launder money, maybe don't walk into the bank that you just stole it from. I've said it once and I'll say it again. It might be a guy thing.
Well, guy thing or not, that's just what he did. He deposited some of the stolen money back into the bank he stole it from. It's like Dumb Criminals Ye Old Edition. Now, don't forget, he worked for the Carpenters Company. They knew he wasn't rich, So, of course, they asked him, "Hey, Isaac, where'd you get all the money?" And then, like the cool, calm, intelligent criminal he was, he totally panicked and spilled his guts.
Chris, criminal mastermind, 0. Open mouth, insert foot, 1.
You were going to say insert mastermind.
I was tongue tied.
He told them everything. He ratted out his partner, Cunningham. He told them how Cunningham, who had a room in Carpenter's Hall, had let him in the bank that night, how the two of them used the bank's own key to open up the safe. He told them they were the only people involved. He still had all the money that he had not already deposited into the banks and would be willing to return it for a pardon by the governor.
An example of true friendship. Threw his accomplice under the bus first chance he got.
The governor quickly agreed to the deal, and $160,000 was returned to the bank, and Davis never saw the inside of a jail cell. Now, as for Cunningham, when the police came to arrest him, they found him decomposing, lying in bed in the rented room of Carpenter's Hall, a victim of yellow fever.
Well, you know what they say about karma.
Yeah, and it's just a weird fact that he was still in the same building he stole the money from, only dead. Ugh. Now, as an odd side note here, Carpenter's ghost is said to be one of the many, including some of the founding fathers, that still stock Carpenter's Hall.
You mean Cunningham's ghost?
Did I say Carpenter's ghost?
You did.
That was the name of the building. Yes, Cunningham's ghost.
Of course he's haunting the place, wouldn't you? I mean, your roommate steals your heist money, gets pardoned, you die mid robbery fallout, and now you're stuck spending eternity in the building, crawling with ghosts who all think they're the main character. Yeah, I haunt that place too. Loudly, theatrically. I can't even say that word. And with the kind of petty vengeance that knocks over every quill pen at sight. Oh, and did they ever release lions?
Well, not exactly. In fact, they held him for several more weeks after Davis's confession. Authorities, not willing to look like they screwed up, stuck with the theory that he had made a second key to the vault. The bank, of course, didn't want to make it look like they couldn't keep track of keys, and the constable's $2,000 reward was no good if Lyon wasn't the bank robber.
Because nothing screams justice like, but I already spent the money on a new horse.
Yeah. I wonder if, how much a new horse actually would have cost in Philadelphia at that time.
I have no idea.
Yeah. I think with 2000 you could have bought one or two, maybe. Best they could do was lower his bail to $2,000 and lower the charges against him. Weeks later, they finally released him on bail, and a grand jury cleared him of all charges in 1799. The ordeal had taken a toll. In addition to the illness he suffered in jail, he had dramatic weight loss, and most of those people he called friends had turned their back on him. He was free, but understandably bitter. Once out of jail, he'd write a book about his arrest and imprisonment. Then he hired a lawyer. This case wasn't handled by just any lawyers. It was full of powerhouse attorneys on both sides. Defending the state and the bank was Jared Ingersoll, a signer of the U.S. Constitution, and William Rowell, a well-known and powerful lawyer in his own right. Representing Lyon was his own dream team, with Alexander J. Dallas, who would go on to become Secretary of Treasury, and Joseph Hopkins, whose father was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Hopkins was a well-known and considered one of the best lawyers in the country. It was a clash of legal titans, Philadelphia style.
Philadelphia style. What do you mean by that?
I don't know, maybe someone yelled "Go Birds" in the middle of the trial and threw a beer at somebody, Philly style.
Oh, a guy thing.
Definitely a guy thing. At trial, the representatives of the banks stated that they vowed to keep Lyon in jail even after Davis's confession. Just because Davis had confessed didn't clear Lyon of not being an accomplice and making a key to be used in the robbery. Hopkins, however, pointed out to the jury that instead of releasing him once it was proven he was not the robber, they simply chose to change the charges to an accomplice with nothing to support the new charges.
Oh, I see. We're playing courtroom bingo now. Not the robber? Cool. Let's spin the wheel and try accomplice. Next up, accessory by osmosis, or maybe even suspicious vibes in the vicinity. Honestly, the only thing they had solid evidence was their bruised ego.
I, I love suspicious vibes in the vicinity. They questioned the timing of Lyons leaving Philadelphia just days before the robbery. The bank's attorneys were also able to show that Lyons had $1,400 in savings, equal to about $3,500 today. To them, this seemed far too much money for a working class person to have on hand, making them suspicious. Now, remember, Davis was $2,000 short when he returned the money. They would argue that all of this gave them enough probable cause to hold Lyon even after the confession of Davis. Lyon questioned why, if he was involved in the crime, would he return to Philadelphia on his own? Quote, I have come 150 miles to surrender myself. He walked up to the authorities, voluntarily giving himself up, in the process, giving them information on the real criminal, Davis. Davis, who had been pardoned, returned all the money except for the missing $2,000 and fled Philadelphia. But he sent a letter stating that Lyon had nothing to do with the crime. This all had been known to the bank and the authorities, yet they still held Lyon for months in jail.
Please tell me again why the guy sitting in jail is definitely guilty.
Well, the judge instructed the jury to focus on probable cause and malice. He told the jury that there had to be malice or the desire to cause pain or injury on the part of the state and the bank. If they had probable cause to arrest and continue to hold Lyon, then there was no malice. But if they lacked probable cause, then they acted with malice. Now, probable cause is basically a reasonable person would have reason to believe that Lyon was involved in the crime. In short, if they didn't have any reason, ooh, I wonder if that's the ghost of Cunningham.
I don't know.
So if they didn't have probable cause to hold him and they were just keeping him to save face, then they would have to find in favor of Lyon. And it seemed the jury had some questions as to why he was even held after the case seemed to be solved. Was the bank forcing him to cover the missing 2000? Because it is interesting that that is what they set his bail at, and that is what was missing from the original money that was returned. Were authorities too stubborn to admit they had made a mistake?
Or were they all just guys too stubborn to admit they were wrong?
The jury found for Lyon and awarded him the staggering sum of $12,000, around $300,000 in today's money. The bank, of course, appealed and was awarded a second trial. But just before going into the second trial, they settled for $9,000, or roughly $225,000 today. Now, really, you can't use a dollar to dollar comparison. Cash money was not as essential to people's daily lives in 1805, which is when the case was finally settled.
I guess they didn't have the right to a fair and speedy trial back then.
It was written in there, but that's, kind of fair, speedy. Those are, kind of vague words. This sum was equal to almost a decade's wages for the average working person. It set him up for life. He took some of the money, he invested it in fire engines, and became a successful businessman with multiple designs for early firefighting equipment. Later, he paid to have a portrait painted of himself. Instead of being painted in a formal pose in his finest clothes, which was the style of the wealthy, he was painted standing in front of his forge with a leather apron.
That's right. Real men pose with fire and no regret. Well, maybe some regret.
Uh, Hey, if you look closely at the painting, you'll see in the background the walls of the Walnut Street prison.
So, whatever happened to that Davis guy?
Well, Davis started a long tradition of foolish criminals, like the person who buys beer at a liquor store, then robs that same liquor store, leaving behind his ID, or the famous case of the bank robber who wrote a stick up note on one of his own deposit slips, complete with his name and home address printed on it.
This is the kind of decision making that makes you say, sweetie, maybe crime just isn't your thing. Like, bless your heart, but even toddlers cover their tracks more than that.
Mhm. Then, of course, Lyon would give us the great American tradition of when wronged, don't get mad, get even, or maybe a little both, and then sue the crap out of them. This has been History is Criminal. Thanks to my sources, the carpenterhall.org, historythings.com, britannica.com, and also a big thank you to my co host, the lovely Kimberly, for her thoughts on today's topic. Come back in a week when we look at the Queen Bandit of Arizona, Pearl Hart. And as always, if you like what you heard, tell a friend. And if you didn't like it, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.